Good evening, black people and all allies fighting for black liberation, black prosperity, and black joy. I'm Charles Blow, and welcome to Prime. In just a few days, we'll mark 1 month since the Senate officially killed the voting rights bill. It was January 19th when Manchin and Sinema joined Republicans to reject a change to the filibuster rules in order to pass voting rights. And since then, we have heard much of nothing from the Biden administration and Democrats about what's next. Biden, Harris, Schumer, and others swore they'd keep fighting and stop at nothing until voting rights were protected.
As long as I have a breath in me, as long as I'm in the White House, as long as I'm engaged at all, I'm going to be fighting to change the way these legislatures have moving.
We keep fighting. We are committed to seeing this through, however long it takes and whatever it takes.
The Democratic caucus pledges to keep working until voting rights are protected for every American.
Not only does it feel like the administration has moved on, it doesn't even appear that Biden was asked about voting rights in his recent interview with NBC that just aired during the Super Bowl. Senators Clyburn and Klobuchar and others have tweeted their support since last month, but unless others are fighting a shadow war behind the scenes, there's not much happening, and we're certainly not seeing much of a public fight. Voting rights advocates have been saying for months that time is running out, and now time has indeed run out in many of the first states to vote in the midterms. Early voting in key primaries began in Texas yesterday, and some elected officials are describing nightmare effects from the new restrictive voting laws. In the Democratic stronghold of Harris County, that's mostly Houston, a judge tweeted that about 40% of mail-in ballot applications and ballots have been rejected. In Dallas County, about 28% of mail-in ballots have been rejected so far. In Williams, which is north of Austin, is a suburb north of Austin, 25% have been rejected, and on and on and on. The part of Texas's law that may be doing the most damage is requiring absentee voters to include a state identification number, like a driver's license number, or if you don't have a driver's license, a partial voter social security number, both when requesting a mail-in ballot and when returning a completed ballot. These numbers must match information in a voter's record for ballot requests to be accepted and votes to be counted. And it's not just Texas. 18 other states have also passed new restrictive voting laws since the 2020 election. And if what's happening in Texas is a foreshadowing of what is to come in other states, we are in trouble. Joining me now to discuss is Texas State Representative Jasmine Crockett and Texas State Organizing Manager of Black Voters Matter Fund, Dionna Hardin. So, Jasmine, it's already started. They told us, first of all, we all have to start this conversation by saying the real villains here are the Republican parties who on the state level have instituted these laws and on the federal level have not done anything to stop these laws from taking effect. Real villains. But the people who are the friends of the voters who have positioned themselves that way have been the Democrats. They said they were going to keep fighting and nothing was going to stop them from fighting. But I don't see where the fight has been since this went down, and now you guys are voting. How much of a problem are you seeing so far in what is happening under these new restrictive voting laws?
Yeah, first of all, it's great to see you, and it's great to see my good friends down there in Houston. She left us in Dallas, but that's a whole other issue. But what I will tell you is that when we left the state of Texas, we made it clear what this was about. We made it clear that it had nothing to do with voter fraud, but instead, we knew that it was always about voter suppression. But let me tell you something. We are Texas strong. And so I know that our president said that we needed to maybe organize, and you've got Dionna on here to talk about that. And let me tell you something. People are fired up. I was very, very concerned that we would have a low turnout. But even in looking at the numbers from the first day of early voting on yesterday and comparing them to 2018, we are up by about 50% on our first day. And so I think people finally understand, listen, we got to do something. We got to vote the bad ones out. We got to get the good ones in if we're going to see the change that we need to see. So I am hoping that Texas rises to the occasion where our Texas Republican elected officials failed us, as well as where we were failed by the U.S. Senate.
Dionna, you are in Austin. They have seen, what is it, 25% rejection rate. Houston saw a 40% rejection rate in mail-in ballots, 28% in Dallas. Do you believe that you are going to be able to out-organize and out-energize what is clearly very high rejection rates for the people who are trying to cast their ballots so far online, by mail-in ballots?
So I do believe in people power, right? Like I don't agree with the way that it was presented. Like it was our responsibility to handle the problem, but I do understand the time that we're in, and I think that everyone feels the power of this collective moment, and we're all doing everything that we can to preserve the power that's been. Acquired, but then to also create pathways to push forward. There's a lot of confusion going on now, and we've been trying to play a pivotal role in trying to educate, empower, and mobilize. Kind of as we're educating ourselves on the new bills, making sure that we share the information with community members that are doing the work on a local level, and really. Supporting them, and being patient with each other as we learn and grow. But I think that we definitely can surprise everyone. Texas is not to be disregarded. We are a majority minority state, and I think that the people have something to say. So I definitely believe in the power of the people.
So, Jasmine, last year the Justice Department filed a lawsuit against the state of Texas over some of its voter restrictions and voter changes. What has come of that, and what can, if anything, the federal government do at this point when people are already voting?
Yeah, no. So everything is still pending, and that's part of the game, right? Part of the game is to make sure that people are, number one, confused, because when you're confused, then it makes it so much harder for you to access the ballot box. The other part of it is we end up in court. Let's say that we did get a court order. Well, who knows about that court order? So that leads to even more confusion. Even if you find relief in the court system, it's hard to communicate that to the masses so that it can make a difference. But as of right now, I hate to say that this is kind of a lost cause for this election, but this was all by design. I mean, we did our lines, we did them late. These voting restrictions, now that was partly on us. We were doing everything that we could to stall out on those voting changes. We also were holding out hope for the federal government. Honestly, if the federal government stepped in tomorrow, that would actually provide relief, because just like that, the president would sign the law and it would become effective immediately. And so what that means is the new provisions would not go into effect. That would completely knock them down. And we could say, hey, everybody, and we could run ads and do everything that we wanted to do to let them know that the old laws are now the current laws. And so until Big Brother says it's okay what Texas did, we can just go with kind of our normal voter suppression, right? Because Texas has always made it harder than every other state to vote. And so we would have some relief. So technically, if the federal government wants to move before March 1st, then yeah, we can see some relief. Do I have high hopes? I do not.
Dionna, the legislators in Texas who wanted to stand up for voters did everything they could. They left the state, went to Washington to break quorum. They did that for weeks and weeks and weeks. The president never made time to meet with them while they were there. And they didn't, the federal government basically did nothing. And so they returned, these laws went into effect. What do you say to the federal government on this issue? Yes, on the Democratic side, there were two holdouts who made this impossible. That was Joe Manchin and there's Kristen Sinema. There's also just not a lot of pressure put on them in a public way to make them at least consider changing their mind under public pressure. What do you make of the federal government's response to what was happening in Texas when the fight was really at the height of the fight?
Yeah, I don't think that the response was adequate, right? We definitely needed support, and we had high hopes, right? There was this concerted effort to kind of help to mobilize a movement here in Texas as our legislators were fleeing, and we really thought that something was going to move. And to see a nearly a year of uh, you know, um, intentional actions to suppress our vote be not met with adequate kind of pushback from the federal government was disappointing. But as an organizer, we can't afford to lose hope, right? Because there are still communities counting on us to guide them on a path forward. So although we do hope that the federal government steps in the meantime, we're organizing on a local level, right? And we're saying to those elected officials that didn't stand up for us, you're going to be up for re-election, right? And we're mobilizing in those areas to create the pressure that was missing in the beginning, because we have to transition the atmosphere. No longer should we be thinking that we work for the elected officials. We have to remind ourselves that the people really have the power, and we also, in the same vein that we're saying that these folks are not advocating for us, we have to be raising up leaders that can replace them, right? So that we understand, they understand what the needs of the community are. Because I think that is an issue, right? Sometimes they're desensitized to the real struggle that is brought on by these laws, and the confusion that really paralyzes folks,
Hmm.
right? You have election administrators who won't even talk about mail-in ballots. They won't talk about the process at all because they're
Hmm.
afraid of being charged with a felony, or acquiring a criminal record. And so the intimidation is real, right? We have folks who are afraid of poll watchers. There's a lot going on, and we feel that the federal government has to step in, but we have to make them do their
Right.
jobs. And I think that the communities are empowering themselves right now, and we really have to create that pipeline as we educate and empower our communities, right? We have to build our own leaders because they
Right.
understand the plight of the communities that they're supposed to be serving.
Right. Jasmine Crockett and Dionna LaFay Hardin, thank you so much for joining me tonight. This is so depressing in a way, but I really pat you guys on the back for trying and continue to push and trying to overcome what has become an even larger hill placed in your way. Thank you so much.